Top of the morning, fellow diggers. It's about 5:30 a.m. here in the southwest of Western Australia. One of my favourite places, Golden Valley Tree Park. Now, I did a previous video from here would have been just before New Year's 2024, so about almost 4 months ago now. And that video was my first ever wholesomely foreboding astrological sky clock forecast. And what my intention was with that video and with this wholesomely foreboding series was to provide what I see as a necessary balance in astrology in particular, about balancing, let's call it Jupiterian optimism, hope, high-mindedness for the future, with strict, disciplined Saturnian realism. And so what I like to do with these wholesomely foreboding previews is to explore both sides. Lean into what we might call the worst possible scenarios of the archetypes, of the celestial archetypes in play, but also provide the Jupiterian empowering, positive scenario that we ourselves personally in our local networks, in our communities, can actually play out to balance what might be the negative manifestation of that in the community. So that's the intention of these videos. Last time when we were here, I took you for a nice walk through the magic oak wood up there. We saw some sheep, we saw a pond, we saw lots of nice trees. We're going to go a different way this time. Might be a bit longer because I think we have a bit more to get through here, because we're going to deal with April Fools, as I have been calling it. As you can see, the lovely almost new moon behind me. It's about almost 3 days off the full moon lunar eclipse that we recently had, which means we are getting very close, within 2 weeks now, of the total solar eclipse, aka the Great American Eclipse, aka, according to many people, the harbinger of biblical end times, the apocalypse, Revelation, the second coming. It's all happening. Holy moly, guys, it's all happening. Are you ready for it? Of course, as well as the eclipse, you also have a very significant Jupiter-Uranus, a 1 in 14-ish year union, archetypal union. Pretty much the best that we can hope for in terms of the outer planets, Jupiter-Uranus. So we have a bit of chaos, potentially, destruction, shenanigans going on, probably from about now onwards until mid-April, hopefully, and then we get a bit of a silver lining. That's the plan anyway, but we'll go through that. Yes, we will. So believe it or not, before I was a wholesomely conspiratorial astrologer, I was an academic. Did a PhD, one of the universities in Perth, the capital city of Western Australia. Just studied for like 12 years. I was one of those perpetual uni students, which is what you have when you have Saturn in your 9th house. It basically means you're destined to be a lifelong researcher and probably join a religious cult at some stage as well. So I've ticked off both of those things. And actually, I did a PhD. I was a lecturer and a tutor for a while, and I was do that in what I would call, what we call here, urban planning, what you might call town planning or city planning. Specialised in, particularly in open space areas, so parks, nature reserves, coastal areas, and balancing social uses, recreation with nature and environmental functions. What I found researching planning was that the concept, the discipline, it is very discipline is the right word there. It's a very Saturnian nature to planning, ruthlessly realistic. What I found was that planning was essentially the act of dealing with uncertainty. That's the core of what it is to practice urban planning, or planning, any sort of planning, decision making to do with public policy. So we're not doing the Oak Grove walk this time. I'm going to take you up to a different part of the park. Hopefully we get a nice view of the sunrise. So how do you deal with uncertainty? How do you plan for the future when the future is so fluid and in motion and almost seems up for grabs? And we're in that stage of the world right now. There's a lot of different timelines at play, a lot of different directions that the world can go. It's very difficult to get a handle on what that might be. There's so many different, even just speaking, conspiratorially, there's so many different conspiratorial angles about where we're headed and what's about to come. And surely they can't all be true. Or can they? We'll find out soon, hopefully. I essentially found that planning could be boiled down primarily to one core statement, one core sort of manifesto, I guess. Quite simple, and a lovely, for our purposes, for our Wholesomely Foreboding purposes, a very nice summation of the Jupiter-Saturn dynamic. Expect the best, but prepare for the worst. How can we, living within fundamentally a realm of duality, you might say, how can we hold both of those things at the same time? How can we hold a positive future in mind, but also realistically face up to, deal with, prepare, plan for negative outcomes, and have safeguard measures in place, have plans in place for if negative outcomes do happen. For when negative outcomes do happen, because let's look at the state of the world at the moment. Things aren't flash, and so it pays to be prepared, and that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to walk you through. We're going to do a wholesome and holistic deep dive into the archetypes of April, focusing particularly on this total solar eclipse, but also bringing in Jupiter, Uranus, and other things that are going on as well. So, could be here for a bit. Snuggle up, get a drink, and let's do this. Let's start with the background, the underlying archetypal framework that we're working with. So we've got this Pluto in Aquarius theme, Pluto in tropical Aquarius thing going on, which seems to be shading the collective at the moment, whether you are adherent to tropical astrology or not. Very much seems like our collective operates within this paradigm. I was a bit skeptical, but I feel like Pluto in Aquarius has definitely proved itself to be a thing. So this isn't our first eclipse season with Pluto, the lord of the underworld, in the sign of the water bearer. We did have one in April 2023, actually. That was our first round. And that eclipse, which was fun, happened to be exactly square Pluto. So our first Pluto in Aquarius eclipse, solar eclipse, was square pretty much to the degree Pluto. So I assume nothing dramatic and intense and sudden happened to do with, Aquarian, Pluto-ish Aquarian things like, I don't know, technology, space, travel, transhumanism, and the questionable mindset of the transhumanists who want to lead us into a dystopian age of Aquarius world. I'm sure nothing dramatic happened at all right around that eclipse.
This is the world's most powerful rocket taking off. And this is it exploding shortly after. After years of development, SpaceX's Starship and its super heavy rocket with its 33 Raptor engines finally got airborne in April, for a short while at least.
You have to admire the chutzpah somewhat of calling a rocket explosion a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, but hey, good on them. So that's our background. That was our first go. We don't have a square this time, so I don't think we should be expecting sort of anything that explosive. Hopefully, we'll get to that soon. So I think we can expect Pluto just to be more of a background actor, perhaps, rather than a obvious instigator in these events. What we actually have a really nice Pluto actually sextiles. It's sextiling Neptune, so it goes Pluto in Aquarius and then Neptune in Pisces thing going on. But it also has a stronger sextile to Venus. So that's our support. That's our support throughout this time. Pluto, Venus, really digging deep into our relationships, into our values, to our desires, even into romance if you're fortunate enough to have romantic options at this time. This is where this is where your support is. This is where you can ground yourself. This is where you can start to sink into some of this intensity that's going on. So really embodying that Venusian security. We sort of think of it as the ruler of Taurus. It is grounded, secure, enjoying its comforts. So that's where Pluto seems to be leading us this time around. So I think we can understand this Pluto in Aquarius thing. It is to do with bringing out the depths, the weirdness, the strangeness of the collective. That is the 11th sign, the 11th house. It is the collective. So there's going to be this sort of lurking weirdness on the edge of anything to do with the collective over April. And so I think it pays to just keep that in mind about when if you do choose to be in the crowd across April, and particularly April 8th, just to sort of keep that in mind. There might just be weird shit happening. People acting in ways that acting in public in ways which might seem confronting, uncomfortable. Might see like just weird stuff in the sky, aside from the eclipse. Nice little fig tree there. Alright, let's head up. Alright, let's start to unpack what's going on. So our first support actor. So we've got a bunch of conjunctions which sort of flavour, which really determine the nature of April. If you look at the chart, it's quite odd. We've got these sextiles from Pluto to Venus and Neptune, and Pluto's just about to come into a square with Mercury. But apart from that, there's no aspects. So we've got this sort of conga line of planets from obviously Pluto and Aquarius, then through Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. And in Taurus we have Jupiter and Uranus. And that's going to be the second filter or archetypal flavour for this, because that will become conjunct on the 20th. So we're going to be, as the eclipse happens, we're going to be building up to some sort of probably climax of this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction as well. So what does that mean? In general, again, I think this is as good as we can hope for in terms of the outer planets. So it's good, it's positive. This is our sudden silver lining, I think, at the end of April. This is what Jupiter-Uranus brings. But there might be a bit of disruption. Uranus likes to disrupt things, likes to do things very quickly, out of nowhere, just to shake things up. Freedom, liberation. So I might have to deal with a few little hiccups first. That's what Uranus seems to suggest to us anyway. If we're going to deal with the negative, one of the negative of this combination is what we might call radical or extremist expressions of religion. Jupiter is to do with spirit, high-mindedness, philosophy, spirituality, in a more a bit more of a practical, conceptual sense than Neptune, which is more about just the the all-encompassing sort of spirituality. So Jupiter is associated with things like religion and even cults, and so we do see, when we see the negative manifestations of spirituality, that's often to do with Jupiter, and with Uranus it has this extremist, radical, rebellious aspect to it. We don't need astrology to tell us that the prospect of radicalised forms of religion are possible at the moment. Basically all three of the main branches, Abrahamic branches, are a bit fired up at the moment, aren't they? Really leaning into this apocalyptic vibe. And so we sort of seem to be at this this flashpoint in terms of the role, the purpose, the viability of organised religion in terms of Judaism, Christianity, Islam. There's a reckoning happening there, it seems, and that might come to a head over this period, over April. It's hard to tell what that looks like, but yeah, something to keep in mind, I think. Head up. It's the Australian connection. Lovely little walk. We're not far away from that sunrise either. Good, because my hands are cold. So we got this religious extremist vibe going on already, and look, freaking seriously, the simulation really isn't helping here, is it? We've got all this background sort of, almost feels like trolling that we've got, this biblical trolling that's going on around this eclipse in particular, which is just further heightening this almost religious fervour, just make it seem, whether we actually are or not, that we are literally in biblical end time revelation apocalyptic sort of thing. And we might be. I'm not arguing for or against that, but what I'm definitely saying is that there seems to be a agenda to push that vibe, push that scenario and subsequent human behaviour in that direction, in a very purposeful, hopefully not malevolent way, but who knows. So that's a thing to keep in mind. So this eclipse, it is occurring in sidereal Pisces, tropical areas, sidereal Pisces. But what's really interesting is that it is located right next to the constellation of the Whale, which is interesting when we look at the path of the total solar eclipse. And you've probably seen this going around as well. The path of totality crosses right over America. So it goes up through Mexico, over the Texas border, then plots a path sort of northeast. It happens to pass through, or pass very close to 7 towns called Nineveh. So we've got Nineveh, we've got Salem, so the 2017 eclipse, which forms the X, passed through a bunch of towns called Salem. Then we've got Jonah and the whale, the belly of the whale. We've got this whole 3 days of darkness sort of vibe as well going on. And then, like, if all that bollocks wasn't enough, we're getting trolled by a comet as well. The devil comet. Seriously, guys, really? So yes, this rather small, fairly unintimidating comet, which happens to make the shape of like horns or something, apparently, will be photobombing the eclipse, which is fun. So we literally got a devil manifest in the sky during this eclipse. I mean, come on, guys. Seriously. Who's having a laugh? Who's having a laugh here? So that's happening. That's happening. this religious fervour is going to be a thing, and it's going to shape and flavour the events of April. So just to be aware of. That's the downside, but the opportunity, the Uranian opportunity, is liberation, always. Freedom, liberation, and moving humanity forward together in a positive, progressive, sometimes revolutionary direction. I think that will be the main outcome, the main Jupiterian outcome of April, is this idea of, liberation from organised religion, from the superstitions, from the rituals, from the practices, the limiting mindsets that no longer serve us and serve humanity, and to bring it back to, I guess, what religion should be, which is a pathway to what I would call the divine, the divine essence of Christ, of the Christ archetype, which is what is good, what is holy, what is moral, what is eternal. That's what I imagine when we talk about finding Christ, or finding our way to Christ, back to Christ. That's what religion should be, and it's not that, unfortunately. That's Jupiter-Uranus done, pretty much. Now we have a second conjunction, which is extremely significant to what to expect and how to react to the events of April, which is Mars Saturn, the two malefics. Now, Mars Saturn, what can we expect? So we're going to have a very Saturnian time ahead of us for society. We're sort of moving up towards, it's a very interesting and very slightly complex and even confusing Saturn-Neptune conjunction across 2025, 2026. Tries to see as plugging the holes. So we've had Neptune in Pisces, just dissolving distinctions, making everything porous and free-flowing and almost melding together and becoming one. Distinctions, discipline and distinction has almost been removed, and it's just let's call it this sort of globalist mindset of everything becoming one, becoming harmonized, multiculturalism, diversity, cultural melting pots. All this sort of stuff is very much, I think, a sort of Neptune in Pisces sort of vibe. And these things aren't, it's not like there isn't truth to them, but when taken to their extremes and excesses, and when they aren't balanced with what we might call Saturnian discipline, we get this state of the world as we have it now, which is very unstable. So Saturn's generally come in and just start to plug those holes, I think. And we're going to a first, maybe a slightly confronting taste of that, I think, with this Mars-Saturn conjunction in April. I think is that on the 10th, so 2 days after the eclipse. So what can we expect? Firstly, we have one precedent. Just a spiderweb, all good. We have one precedent that can potentially guide us, which would be March of 2020. March 2020. What's happening around then? So we might call this the lockdown configuration, potentially, as it was pretty much exactly on the conjunction at the end of March 31st, 2020, when the global bug lockdowns first came into effect. It wasn't a regular Mars Saturn. We did have just a casual meeting 5 degrees away between Jupiter and Pluto. So expansion, exaggeration, or like a deepening and intensifying of this Mars Saturn sort of like grinding to a halt. That's sort of how I see Mars Saturn. It's just like Mars is sort of active and forceful and wants to do stuff, and then Saturn just like puts these very, very sudden bracing restraints on it, almost hear the brakes go on and the sort of the screeching. That's how I imagine Mars Saturn. So we may have something like that. We don't have a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction this time. We do have lots of other things going on. So it's quite possible that we do get some sort of lockdown scenario as well. I think that's a reasonable prediction to hold. We do have other things going on which might actually contribute to that. So we have Mercury retrograde. This is probably a proper April Fool's joke, because Mercury does go retrograde for the entirety of April, from the 1st of April, from literally April Fool's Day. Do you feel like we're being trolled yet, guys? Anyway, Mercury retrograde. So, what does that mean? We sort of know. Miscommunications, issues to do with information sharing, lines of contact sort of breaking down, not quite working, things getting lost in translation, and also travel. Mercury is particularly short distance travel, but just travel in general. So we could have incidents to do with those things, communications and travel, things not going right there, which is potentially problematic because things have already not been going right in those two departments. It's fair to say we've had various issues with internet and social media recently, and we've had various issues, unfortunately, with air travel in particular. Look in your direction, Boeing. So we don't really need much additional complicating factors for these things to potentially go into difficult scenarios. So again, Mars Saturn, we've got this Jupiter Uranus sort of like spontaneity and sort of reactionary vibe. So we might find that decision makers are feeling particularly reactionary at this time, just like they were in March 2020 as well. And then Mercury retrograde just comes in and just makes everything confusing as well on top of that. Good things to keep in mind anyway, I think. Anything else? Anything else which could sort of feed into this encroaching Saturn, Neptune, now Saturn, Mars sort of grinding to a halt vibe? We do have the path of the eclipse, which, as I said before, passes over a point called Eagle Pass, right on the border of Texas, which is one of the hotspots of the border shenanigans in America, shall we call it. So that seems fairly symbolically powerful, and we know things going on geopolitically are encouraging things in a more restricted direction in terms of the borders of America, let's just put it that way. We might see a catalyzing event or a catalyzing development in terms of those borders and how porous or otherwise they may be in the future. Again, and if we do see that, it may not be just in Texas. We might see some broader, more significant manifestations of this plugging of the holes coming in April. So again, things to be aware of. Should we be travelling? I guess this is the main preparatory thing to consider. Some people won't have a choice, and so if you don't, if it's already set in stone, just beware. Hold these things in mind, take the precautions that are necessary, which you should always do, but be particularly thorough and purposeful and diligent in your preparations, in your travel preparations, if you are going to be doing a particularly significant journey during April. That would be my best advice. But also just to have what would you do? What would you do if the lights literally go out? If we have a communication disruption? If we have some sort of lockdown scenario? If we have, this much fated, much hypothesized 3 days of darkness, or 5 days, 10 days of darkness. How many days is it supposed to be? What's your backup plan? Got a good book? I've got good books ready. I mean, I'm not in America, I'm down in Australia, but I've got options in place for if if the world does grind to a halt. And look, I feel like we might need that in general, collectively, individually. And interesting because a lot of people did think this in 2020 as well, and that almost allowed certain players to get away with more than otherwise they probably should have. So I'm not saying we should actively play into this grinding to a halt vibe, but just to be aware that it is a very particular possibility, and that it can be a time, a much needed time of just getting back to basics, slowing things down, regaining a bit of composure, letting things subside a bit, and to be ready just to lean into that time. It will be a total solar eclipse after all, so it will be a very, in Aries, cardinal, fire, initiating, excellent time to be starting new things, to be looking forward. We've used the lunar eclipse, so South Node eclipse in Libra, lots to do with the past, with potentially things like karmic or spiritual baggage, particularly to do with relationships. So letting go of things which might be sort of limiting us and limiting other people that we relate to, and mutually letting things go, moving on, or letting go of patterns that are not serving either party. And then we move into the Aries eclipse, solar eclipse, and it's all systems go. But if we have that dynamic, but then we also have things grinding to a halt. It's sort of all systems go in a very personal, immediate sense. Things we can do at home, even in candlelight, potentially, these sort of things. So to really sort of lowering the ambitions about this sort of eclipse, cardinal, initiating energy, and just sort of orientating that in a very immediate, local way. That's sort of how I'm imagining this dynamic playing out. So let's lean more into this sort of this Aries vibe, because tropical Aries, it is where the eclipse will be happening. So that's the archetypal sort of mode that the collective will be operating in. It doesn't mean we have to, but it just means that will be there and accessible, and will sort of dictate our responses to a large extent as well. So we have this interesting dynamic between fire and water. You could almost call it this April as like a story or a tale of fire and water. This eclipse in Aries, but then a whole bunch of planets. We still have a stellium in tropical Pisces as well, including Mars. So Mars will be in Pisces. So we even just through that placement we get this mix. Mars being the ruler of tropical Aries. So we're getting this sort of very interesting mix between cardinal fire and mutable water going on. At its best, this is sort of, action aligned with flow, being in that flow state and just acting through instinct, with willpower, with motivation, in a very free-flowing, adaptable, flexible way. So amazing opportunity. Sort of this Pisces Aries vibe is an amazing opportunity to get things done in a really quick, effective way. So to sort of hold that positive keyword combination in mind, and then we need to work through what Mars and Pisces, how that can potentially look in the negative or in the more difficult collective manifestations. For Mars and Pisces, it can be things like passive aggression. So again, Mars is aggression, but Pisces is emotional, is docile in many ways. Doesn't really like to impose itself. So just be wary to avoid those passive aggressive tendencies. But with these conjunctions, I mean, this is one thing I'm learning about astrology as I get more into it. That these conjunctions can manifest very literally, almost too literally sometimes. And with Mars and Pisces, it's quite literally, you know, acts of aggression, acts of destruction, even acts of war on water. And so we had within, nice little bow tree behind me there, probably within 36 hours of the lunar eclipse, the full moon lunar eclipse, we had, I guess, and this would have been 4 days after Mars entered Pisces, we had our first act of aggression and potentially war involving water. I think that set the tone. I feel like that's very much set the tone, the geopolitical tone for April. I'm not going to go too much into that event, just to sort of say that the timing of it, if we look at Baltimore time, the moon was exactly conjunct the north node. The moon was exactly conjunct the south node at 1:28-ish a.m. in Baltimore when a certain bridge went kaput, unfortunately. So that's that seems very significant because this lunar eclipse was about, again, south node is about past, what's come behind us, what has informed how we've got here, what our foundations are, even where we feel comfortable, but it's ultimately what we're leaving behind. It's what we need to break cords with to move on and to move towards where we're supposed to be going, archetypal direction in this life, which is the north node, Rahu. So it seems significant that this south node moon lunar eclipse event impacted a piece of infrastructure named after the chap who wrote the Star Spangled Banner. When he did that, there was also civil war connections with that time as well. And if we think about America being still in its Pluto return, so this transformative upheaval about everything, about the very core concepts about what America is. So we've got this Pluto return thing going on, and now we've got this little this additional event to sort of set the tone, to set this karmic tone about what America is leaving behind and potentially what it is moving towards as well. So I think the sky clock and the realm just gave us a pretty good hint about what might be in store geopolitically anyway, and particularly in America over April. Alright, let's start to wrap this up. We've been going on a while here, we're just about there. So the last conjunction we have to deal with is the eclipse itself, which will be conjunct the comet Chiron. So Chiron was discovered in 1977, and I'm not going to pretend here that I can offer you more insight or archetypal guidance into Chiron in astrology than the rest of the astrology community can, because it seems like we are still getting to grips with what Chiron means for us in an astrological archetypal sense. Since it was discovered, it has sort of become aligned with the Chiron, I guess, archetype or god from Greek mythology, and it's this synchro-mystic, unexplainable synchro-mystic nature of astrology where these planetary bodies seem to somehow, beyond our control, come to embody the correct or the appropriate mythological archetype. And we see that with Chiron, that's gradually come to represent this idea of the wounded healer. The wounded healer, this character, this person who is deeply hurt in a certain way, holds trauma that actually can't be resolved this is the challenging thing about Chiron archetypally, is that we always think about it through healing, through the paradigm of healing, but that process of healing comes from something that can't be healed. That's sort of the basis of it. So in our charts, the position of Chiron points towards a wound that we can't heal. It is our deepest wound. Will be a wounding, a source of trauma, a source of pain and difficulty that will be with us for this life. But by that being there, by that being constantly present in our personality, in our experience of life, it provides the catalyst for us to bring about healing in the world. So it's like we compensate by healing the domain of society, or the part of society that we can't heal about ourselves. So it's a very, it's not, there's a lot of negativity associated, a lot of negative responses, I guess, associated with Chiron, which aren't worth going into, except to say that there's a high chance we are going to see those, both the good and the bad, manifest across April, particularly around the eclipse. Why is that? This is how I sort of imagine astrology in our realm sometimes. We have these very clever coders or designers up there beyond time and space, beyond the firmament somewhere, sort of dictating our things, and they just like to sort of make things quite enjoyable and have a good laugh and keep themselves entertained. So we've introduced this new comet called Chiron, linked to the wounded healer archetype, sort of end of the 70s, gradually starting to become a greater part of the collective consciousness. But we need a proper reveal. We need an archetypal reveal party for Chiron. So how do we do that? We could we use an eclipse? Oh, an eclipse? Yeah, fuck yeah, let's do an eclipse. What about a total solar eclipse? Whoa, yes. Yes. What about like a overhyped, ritualized, apocalyptic total solar eclipse? Fuck yeah, nice. Awesome. So should we make Chiron exactly conjunct, literally not just to the degree, but to the minute of this eclipse? Or actually, would that be a bit obvious? Would people start to ask questions? Yeah, possibly. Okay, well, what if we made it 1 minute, 1 minute off, just to be safe? Oh yeah, that would work. What about 2 minutes? Just to be safe, just 2 minutes. Yeah, okay. 2 minutes, yeah, okay, cool. And here we are. Chiron conjunct to 2 minutes the position of the eclipsed sun during this ritualized celestial event. So this is our Chiron reveal party, among other things. So whatever it is that Chiron represents, astrologically, archetypally, what is its role in forwarding human consciousness evolution, for want of a better buzz term, we will see it. It will be revealed to us in April across this eclipse. We might not understand it fully at the moment, but we will look back on April and realise that we have been shown the Chiron archetype more clearly, more starkly, maybe, than any time before, and quite possibly any time in the immediate future as well. So it's interesting, so this is going to be a healing moment, and that's what we have to keep in mind, that this will be a profound, unique, unparalleled opportunity for both individual and collective healing. So that's what we hold in mind, that's what we keep in mind throughout this whole period. But I guess my question is, does that healing, does it have to be initiated or catalyzed by some sort of collective wounding first? That's the question I'm holding in mind, and So this eclipse was always going to be astrologically significant. I think with this exact Chiron conjunction, with Jupiter Uranus coming to its culmination, and with Mars and Saturn giving us this taste, this sort of grinding to a halt preview of the reintroduction of discipline and distinction we're going to see over the next few years. This was never going to be a non-event, but we've got these extra layers that have been since introduced. I'm not sure how they've been introduced in some ways. I mean, some people would look at this, I guess, this path across America, tying in with these biblically linked towns. Some would see that as sort of divine, or as biblical prophecy being fulfilled or being brought out, and that we need to turn to God and repent and prepare for judgment. I'm not saying that's incorrect, but what I see, what the alternative perspective is people, potentially even founding fathers of America who understood the occult, understood astrology and the occulted aspects of astrology, and use that information to influence the future, to shape the future. That feels like a more reasonable, rational way to interpret some of the surrounding events to this eclipse. And so what it seems like is that we've moved from experiencing a solar eclipse to experiencing a solar eclipse ritual. And if we leave the malevolent, benevolent question out of it about, if there are people trying to make this into ritual, what's the purpose of it? We can just get back to the basis that we have been given an opportunity to experience a solar eclipse in a way that it was originally intended, which is a event that causes uncertainty, which does induce some amount of fear, which has a sense of foreboding to it, and which requires a unavoidable disruption to the natural order. And that is what a solar eclipse is. It is when the sun goes dark. It is a very rare, it's an event which suddenly makes people question whether the rules have disappeared, whether the basic patterns and cycles that we go through have suddenly been interrupted. And so when the sun goes dark in the middle of the day, you can imagine what it would have been like for people who lived different lifestyles to us, lifestyles which were more orientated towards the sky clock, towards being in line with the movement of the luminaries, not just the sun, but all of the luminaries. And this would have been a acute moment of fear, potentially panic, even chaos, before things return back to normal. And so if I was going to try and pin down what the core essence of this eclipse experience would be, it would be a reenactment of what it was like to experience a solar eclipse in the past. And so that is, in that sense, it's quite an exciting opportunity. It's a unique opportunity for us to experience something as a society which we otherwise wouldn't have access to, because our lives have been so removed in many ways from the natural cycles, through technology, through a whole bunch of other more recent introductions into the culture. So we keep that in mind, and keep that in mind that this will be a temporary thing, that it might feel like at some stage the chaos has ascended, that the madness of the crowd, Pluto in Aquarius sort of collective psychosis almost that can unshow itself, that it's reasonable to expect that will manifest in some way. It will be, specific to different locations, I assume, but there may still be some sort of global, realm-wide experience of this solar eclipse experience, I guess. So what's our core response to that? For me, I'm primarily a sidereal astrologer. I look at the sky. I take my cues from the observable sky. If we look at the eclipse, it is right in the middle of the constellation of Pisces, so the fish. Again, links to water, links to spirituality, this connecting force that ties every living thing, every conscious thing together. This unifying and connecting ocean of spirit. That's my sort of core archetypal association or signification with Pisces, but also peace and calm, and acceptance, and also detachment. And if we look at the exact position of this eclipse, it'll be right on the ecliptic, obviously, and right on this sort of the meeting point, almost the cord that ties the two fish trying to swim in different directions. It's the cord that ties them together. So it's the sort of unifying binding force that seems to be where this eclipse seems to be pointing us. And the nakshatra, so the Vedic nakshatra, is Revati, which is peace. It is essentially the Piscean at peace, having gone through the fire, moved through the collective, reckoned with duality, negotiated the intensity of the world, and found the true meaning behind why we have these intense, extreme experiences in this world, and finds itself at a place of peace, acceptance, and ultimate love for the world, love for humanity, love for others. That is the theme of Revati. It is peace. It is nurturing, it is nourishment, and it is the guide and the wayfinder. So for those of us who have prepared ourselves for any type of eclipse chaos, when the sun might literally go dark, when the lights might go out, when things grind to a halt, we can be the guide, we can be the way shower for the rest of humanity, or just for our community, for our family, for our friends, or even just for us. Guide ourselves through these chaotic times. So I'll leave you with that. Hope you found this helpful. If you made it all the way through, expect the best, prepare for the worst. And enjoy these interesting times that we live in. See you next time, fellow diggers.